The film, based on real events, begins with a peaceful view of a flowery field. Beneath a tree, two young soldiers, Blake and Schofield, are resting. They are awakened by a sergeant who escorts them to the command post in a bunker amidst the muddy trenches, where the British Army had been digging in. Waiting for them in the bunker is General Ehrenmoor. He explains that the Germans have retreated from some areas to regroup further away. However, Colonel Mackenzie, the commander of the neighboring battalion, is preparing to pursue them, a decision the general believes could result in significant human casualties since the Germans are luring them into a trap. There's no communication to warn them of the situation. Among the potential volunteers for this perilous mission is Blake's older brother, as he's considered the most motivated. He's sent with a message to the battalion's location. They equip him and provide supplies, and the officers send the soldier on his way. Schofield isn't too keen on the idea of setting out in broad daylight, but Blake is in a hurry. The comrades make their way through a complex maze towards the exit, encountering tired and frightened colleagues along the way. During their journey, it's revealed that Schofield survived one of the bloodiest battles in human history, the Battle of the Somme. He even received a medal for it but doesn't like to boast about it. As they near the end of the trenches, they have to navigate through tangled pathways. They come across a lieutenant who has taken command of this section to find a way out and cross the front line. The officer shows them the nearest passage through the barbed wire and asks them to fire a signal flare if they reach enemy positions and confirm that the Germans have indeed withdrawn. The soldiers crawl out of the trenches and advance cautiously, as the Germans do not open fire. They move in a half-crouch, sneaking past the bodies of humans and horses. While crossing it, Schofield accidentally grazes his hand. The comrades reach a shell crater and then crawl through a trench. The desolate field is marked by traces of recent battles and welcomes them with mud. Two airplanes fly overhead, forcing them to jump into another crater. Once the planes have passed, the messengers continue on their way, heading towards a crater in front of the German barbed wire. After crossing it, the men find themselves at the German positions. However, the trenches, as the reconnaissance had reported, are completely empty. Unable to believe their eyes, the British soldiers descend and look around. Underfoot, there are embers from the documents the retreating Germans burned. Judging by the warmth, the last soldiers left the positions not long ago. Finding no one in the trenches, the British soldiers descend into an underground barracks where nothing remains except abandoned beds and rats that have grown fat on large chunks of meat. While checking the remaining supplies for some German canned food, Schofield notices a wire from a tripwire mine. A bold rat accidentally triggers it, causing an explosion. Blake sees that Schofield has been buried and starts digging to rescue him. The bunker is creaking and falling apart, so they hastily leave the underground before it completely collapses. Along the way, they even have to jump over a chasm, but they eventually make it to the other side of the bunker, passing through it. Before them lies a German artillery position, full of spent shell casings and disabled cannons. Schofield rinses his eyes from the dust, having used up all the water in his canteen. He's not pleased that he has to go on this mission with Blake. Meanwhile, a signal flare is sent as a sign that the Germans have withdrawn, and the messengers continue their journey. They pass by abandoned cannons, traverse a scorched strip of forest, and notice airplanes in the sky returning from a reconnaissance mission. Soon they arrive at a farmhouse with a partially destroyed fence and a cherry orchard that has been chopped down. The soldiers stealthily approach the building, fearing that the enemy may be inside. However, their fears turn out to be unfounded, as the farmhouse is deserted. Nearby in the field, a lone cow grazes, and in the barn, there's a full bucket of milk, which Schofield uses to refill his canteen. At that moment, a thunderous roar fills the air, and an aerial dogfight ensues. British pilots shoot down a German aircraft, and the smoking plane crashes directly into the barn. The soldiers successfully retrieve the pilot from the burning wreckage. Schofield rushes to get water to extinguish the pilot's burning clothes, but at that moment, the German regains consciousness and attacks Blake. Schofield shoots the ungrateful aviator and hurries to help his comrade, but Blake is fatally wounded in the abdomen. Schofield tries to lift Blake to carry him to safety, but he writhes in pain. Blake eventually succumbs to his injuries, and as his life slips away, he implores Schofield to find his brother and deliver a message from the general. After taking the documents and the identification tag, Schofield drags his friend's body away to hide it. When other British soldiers arrive, they assist in moving the body. Captain Smith appears, offering to give Schofield a ride since their convoy of vehicles is heading in the right direction. The messenger climbs into one of the trucks with the rest of the personnel. While the others share stories, Schofield sits silently. However, when the truck gets stuck in the mud, he climbs out and takes charge to help free it. Together with the soldiers, they manage to push the vehicle out of the mud, and they all pile back into the truck. The others inquire about where Schofield is in such a hurry. Reluctantly, he explains the mission and emphasizes that the lives of 1,600 men depend on his ability to deliver the order before dawn. However, when the convoy reaches a destroyed bridge over a river, they are forced to detour to the next crossing. But the messenger has no time for detours, so he decides to continue on foot. Before parting ways with the transport, Captain Smith advises Schofield to deliver the order to Colonel Mackenzie in the presence of witnesses to avoid any disobedience. As he leaves the convoy behind, Schofield sneaks through the ruins of the fallen bridge. An enemy sniper catches him in the act and opens fire. The British soldier must now crawl under the sniper's deadly aim, risking his own life. Approaching a staircase, he prepares for a duel and opens fire in response while exposing himself. Convinced that the German sniper is hit, Schofield sneaks into the building where the enemy is holed up. On the second floor, he discovers the sniper's position. However, when he opens the door, he takes a bullet in the canteen and tumbles down the stairs. Regaining consciousness in the darkness, and perhaps thanks to his helmet's protection, the bloodied Schofield crawls back. The wounded German on his combat post dies while Schofield is making his way back. A signal flare lights up the ruins of the town. The messenger cautiously makes his way through the shattered streets until the sounds of nighttime gunfire force him to start running. Navigating through the debris, the young man emerges onto the central square, where amidst the flashes of fire and smoke, he spots a soldier, not sure if it's a comrade or an enemy. After hesitating with his rifle, Schofield yields the initiative to the enemy and is forced to flee, eventually finding refuge in the basement of a nearby house. There, he encounters a young French girl who is hiding from the soldiers. Despite the language barrier, they manage to understand each other and determine their next course of action. Noticing Schofield's head wound, the girl uses her scarf to dress it. Schofield realizes that besides them, there is also a baby hiding in the basement, whom the French girl found somewhere on the street. He leaves them his supplies and a canteen with milk from the farmhouse. With time running out until dawn, Schofield leaves the shelter, knowing that the lives of over 1,500 men depend on him. In the shadows, he stealthily moves past German soldiers, but one of them eventually notices him. Schofield tries to negotiate with the soldier, offering to let him go in exchange for his silence, but the soldier attempts to call for reinforcements. Schofield has no choice but to engage in a fight, while other Germans in the ruins try to shoot down the audacious Englishman. However, Schofield manages to escape the town and jumps into the turbulent waters of a nearby river. The current carries him farther and farther away, and he desperately struggles not to meet an ignoble end in the waves. After a waterfall, he is fortunate to grab onto a log and continues to float on it. As the blossoms from a cherry tree adorn the water, serving as a reminder of his fallen comrade, Blake. Schofield's journey in the water ends at a dam made of logs and corpses. Climbing onto the shore and releasing the stress that has built up, he finds himself in a forest and continues onward, driven by a sense of duty. Soon, he is drawn to the quiet singing echoing among the trees, which grows louder as he stumbles towards the gathering of soldiers in the woods. Seated around the singer, they pay little attention to his song, and as it ends, the regiment falls into formation. They notice the weary Schofield, who learns that those gathered in the woods are part of the second wave of an impending attack. Realizing time is running out, the young man races to find Colonel Mackenzie. Pushing past soldiers preparing for a suicidal assault, he runs through narrow trenches, asking for the colonel's whereabouts on the way. On the slopes, the casualties of the first wave already lie. Meanwhile, the German artillery begins shelling the positions, sending up plumes of earth into the air. Schofield presses on, despite all obstacles. Understanding that the order to attack is imminent and that the soldiers obstruct his path to the colonel, the messenger climbs out of the trench and sprints, encountering soldiers from the first wave rushing towards the German fortifications. Schofield reaches the command bunker, but the officers inside are reluctant to let him in. He barges in, waving the letter from the general. Colonel Mackenzie initially refuses to listen to the audacious youth, but using a deductive approach by reading the letter, he understands that it is better to halt the attack. After issuing the appropriate order, Mackenzie confesses to the messenger that, in a week's time, his men will be sent into the attack at dawn anyway. Such are the orders of the army. At the exit, Schofield inquires from the colonel's aide where to find Lieutenant Blake. The aide informs him that Blake led his unit in the first wave, so he can be found among the wounded or the dead right on the field. Morally devastated and physically exhausted, the young man wanders through the trenches, stumbling under the feet of medics, and inquires about Blake. Arriving at a field hospital, he walks among the wounded, calling for Lieutenant Blake, but there is no response. Schofield is on the verge of despair when suddenly a young officer responds to his call. From the officer's face, it is clear that he hails from the same hometown in Westeros. Schofield admits that he was sent here with his younger brother, Lieutenant Blake, but when asked about his brother's whereabouts, he remains silent, and the older officer understands the implication. The messenger hands over the identification tag and, after a few kind words about his friend and a handshake, he slowly walks towards a nearby tree. There, Schofield sits on the ground, leaning against the trunk, and retrieves photographs of his family, his mother, and his sister from his pocket. On the back of one of the pictures is a handwritten message, "Come back to us." The tired and exhausted soldier closes his eyes, and the film comes to an end.